A maid's daughter stands on a freezing Manhattan sidewalk, her hands blackened with charcoal, selling drawings to pay for her mother's treatment. Her sketchbook costs $4.99. Her sign says $6.25 minimum, art for mom's care. Inside the glass building behind her, guests in silk and diamonds toast to charity innovation. Security shifts closer, boots scraping the curb. Someone laughs at her sign. Another snaps a photo. She keeps drawing. The wind tears one of her sketches away, landing near the wheel of a black SUV. The door opens halfway. A man's voice asks, steady but sharp, who told her she doesn't belong here. Her name is Ana Morales, 18, senior at Roosevelt High in Jackson Heights, Queens. She wakes at 5:30 each morning to iron her mother's uniform, a white collared shirt that always smells faintly of bleach and lavender detergent. Her mother, Maria, has worked as a housekeeper for the Vale family on the Upper East Side for over 10 years. Their world is spotless, wordless and expensive. Ina's is loud, shared, and waiting on the next paycheck. She's the kind of student teachers call quiet but precise. Her notebooks are filled not with doodles but portraits, faces from subway rides, grocery lines, the laundromat, drawn with the same charcoal stubs her mother uses to mark laundry bags. Art to Ana is proof that even smudges can become something beautiful. Her mother's mantra, spoken every night before lights out, "We don't bow. We don't break." Ana repeats it silently whenever she walks past doormen who never meet her eyes. When the coughing began, Maria said it was nothing. When the hospital bill came, it said everything. Ina counted what they had, $212 in savings, 2 part-time checks pending, and an estimate for treatment that belonged in another universe. Still, Ana refused to ask the Vales for help. Pride was her inheritance. Instead, she turned her sketches into a lifeline. Copy paper portraits sold to neighbors, small donations wrapped in gratitude and embarrassment. But the math never worked. Then one afternoon, while delivering clean linens to the Vale penthouse, she overheard Mrs. Vale mention a charity art gala in Midtown. People pay thousands for street-style art now. The phrase stayed with her all night. By morning, Ana had a plan. She would bring her work where the money lived, and that decision, made on no one's permission, would change everything. The Urban Futures Art Gala sounded like a world away from Queens, yet Ana treated it like a shift she could clock into. She found the address online, Midtown, West 57th Street, a place of glass towers and polished concrete. The event promised open access for emerging artists, though fine print whispered otherwise. But Ana didn't care. Hope doesn't read disclaimers. She packed her essentials, the $4.99 sketchbook, a handful of charcoal sticks, a small folding card table borrowed from a neighbor, and a handwritten sign in block letters, "Art for Mom's Treatment, $6.25 minimum." That number mattered. $6.25 was what she and her mother spent on 2 bus transfers every day. If she could earn even 10 times that, she could buy her mother's medication refill without borrowing. By evening, she was there, among murmuring crowds in long coats, valet lights flickering off car hoods, the faint hum of an electric cello from inside the building. She set up her table just past the revolving door, where the wind funneled cold air straight into her sleeves. Still, her heart raced, not from fear, but from the sense that finally she was doing something. Her first customer was a tourist from Ohio, charmed by the idea. 5 minutes, 10 lines, a face captured. He left a 20 and a smile. Ina's hand shook as she tucked the bill under her thermos. She could almost see the prescription bag in her mind. For the first time in weeks, she felt a future, fragile but real, unfolding right there on cheap paper, across the street. However, a different kind of gaze settled on her table. The gallery coordinator had noticed the small crowd gathering around the girl with the handwritten sign, and was already reaching for her phone. The crowd around Ana's table grew faster than she expected. Office workers stopped on their way home. Couples lingered before the gala, and someone even asked for her social media, something she didn't have. For a brief moment, she forgot the cold. Her mother's face, smiling in a hospital bed, flickered in her imagination. She thought, maybe I can do this. Then came the voice. Miss, you can't sell here. A woman in a tailored black coat approached. Melissa Grant, event coordinator for the Vail Foundation. Her smile was tight, professional, the kind used for people who don't belong. Anna blinked. I'm just outside on the sidewalk. It's private frontage, sweetheart. The word sweetheart landed like a slap. You're soliciting at a corporate event. Please pack up before we have security assist. Heads turned. Guests from the line stared, whispering. One woman laughed softly and said, "Oh, how charming, charity outside a charity." Another murmured, "Looks staged." Anna tried to explain. "My mother, she's sick. I'm selling my drawings to help pay for her," but Melissa had already signaled to a uniformed guard. "Rules are rules," she said flatly. "You can't disrupt our brand partnerships." The guard stepped forward. His gloved hand tipped her table, just enough for the sketchbook to slide off. Pages scattered, smudged faces landing in puddles. Someone in heels stepped on one, leaving a wet print across the paper. "Hey!" Anna dropped to her knees, gathering the sheets, her fingers trembling. Her sign tore down the middle. The jar of bills tipped, coins rolling toward the curb. A man in a tuxedo picked up one of her soaked sketches, squinting. "If you framed it, maybe," he said, then tossed a crumpled $1 into a jar. Laughter rippled. Anna bit her lip until she tasted metal. "Please," she whispered. "I'll move," but the guard shook his head. "You need to leave, miss, now." Wind whipped her hair across her face. The paper in her hands turned limp from the drizzle. For the first time she wanted to cry, but didn't. "We don't bow. We don't break." Then the low rumble of an idling engine cut through the murmurs. The black SUV at the curb hadn't moved. A man's voice came from its half-opened window, calm but commanding. "What exactly are we doing to her?" From the back seat of the black SUV, Ethan Vail watched the entire thing unfold through tinted glass. He hadn't meant to stop. His driver had pulled over for a call. But the sight of the girl, small against the wind and city noise, had caught his attention long before the shouting started. He recognized her, not by name but by connection. She was Maria's daughter, the quiet one who sometimes waited in the service lobby of his family's penthouse. He'd seen her once or twice, holding a sketchbook while her mother cleaned upstairs. His father had mentioned her only once. The maid's girl has artistic delusions. Now that maid's girl was being humiliated in front of his father's guests, Ethan's stomach tightened as he saw the gallery coordinator gesture sharply. The guard overturning her table. The girl didn't fight, didn't shout. She simply gathered her ruined drawings with the kind of restraint that makes bystanders more uncomfortable than outrage ever could. Around her, laughter floated like cheap perfume. Inside the SUV, Ethan's phone vibrated, a reminder of his role tonight. The Vail Foundation's annual Art and Philanthropy Gala, celebrating inclusive creativity. He was expected to deliver a short speech about emerging artists, smile for photographs, and make his father proud, but he couldn't look away. He noticed details, the way her hands trembled but never stopped moving, the handwritten 6.25 minimum sign, the smudges of charcoal across her knuckles. She looked cold, soaked, and still somehow composed. The hypocrisy hit him like a slap. Inside that building, his father's donors were toasting opportunity for all. Outside, one was being pushed off the sidewalk for the crime of trying to survive. The event coordinator turned toward his SUV, gesturing impatiently, assuming he was just another guest waiting to enter. Ethan lowered the window fully. "Excuse me?" he called out. His tone was polite, but it carried. "What's happening here?" The crowd stilled. Someone whispered his name, Ethan Vail. The guard stepped back immediately. The coordinator's face paled, voice faltering. "Oh, Mr. Vail, we were just handling..." He stepped out of the SUV, adjusting his coat against the wind, eyes fixed on the girl, clutching her torn sign. "Handling what exactly?" he asked, voice low but sharp. "A young artist selling her work, or someone reminding us what charity is supposed to mean?" And just like that, the air shifted. The whispers stopped. The power in the space, the silent kind built from last names and money, began to tilt. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His name did that for him. He stepped closer to Anna, the streetlight cutting a pale stripe across his suit jacket. "You're with the event now," he said, calm but final. "The Vale Foundation will cover her vendor fee for tonight. Send the invoice to me personally." The coordinator blinked. "But Mr. Vale, she's not. She is now." He looked at Anna, not the crowd. "If you're still willing to draw, come inside. You shouldn't have to freeze to prove you're worth seeing." Anna's throat tightened. For a second, she thought it was a trick, another layer of public shame disguised as kindness. But the people watching, the donors, the valet, the doorman, had all gone still. Every movement waited on hers. The guard cleared his throat, suddenly unsure. "Sir, the permit—" "I said invoice me," Ethan repeated, not unkindly. "And someone get her table upright." A murmur rippled through the guests. A woman whispered, "Is this part of the event?" Another answered, "It is now." Ina stood frozen, clutching her wet sketches. Then she caught sight of her sign, ripped but legible enough. "Art for Mom's treatment." She met Ethan's eyes. "I don't want pity," she said quietly. He nodded. "Then don't take pity. Take space." The phrase hit something inside her. Slowly, she gathered her things, righted the table, and followed him toward the glass doors. The warm air spilling from the lobby hit her face like disbelief. As she stepped over the threshold, the murmurs followed, half curiosity, half discomfort. For the first time in her life, Ana Morales walked into a room her mother had only ever cleaned, and every gaze inside the gallery turned toward her. Inside the gallery, the sudden quiet felt heavier than applause. Ina stood beside her small table, reassembled, trembling slightly, while Ethan spoke in low tones with a man whose presence filled the room without effort. Maxwell Vale, his father. Silver hair, perfect posture, an aura of ownership. "What are you doing?" Maxwell asked, voice controlled but edged with steel. "This isn't a rescue mission, Ethan. It's a curated event. Every name here has a purpose, every visual an alignment." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So aligning with humanity breaks the theme?" Maxwell smiled thinly. "Optics matter. The donors expect refinement, not a charity case sketching by the hors d'oeuvres." Anna heard the phrase charity case and looked down at her hands, dark with charcoal dust. She wanted to disappear, but something in her mother's voice echoed inside her. "We don't bow. We don't break." Ethan turned to include her, his tone respectful. "Anna isn't a display. She's an artist earning her mother's treatment, something this foundation claims to stand for." Maxwell's gaze shifted to her. "Are you sure you want this kind of attention, young lady?" "Pity looks generous, but it burns fast." Anna raised her head. Her voice was steady. "I don't want attention. I want a fair price for my work." That's all. The surrounding guests, until now pretending to browse, had gone still. The scent of champagne and perfume thickened. Maxwell exhaled slowly, reading the faces around him. The power he'd built on silent approval was slipping, grain by grain. Ethan took one step closer. Maybe it's time the foundation looked like what it claims to be, open. For a long second, father and son stared at each other, wealth's logic against conscience's demand. Then Maxwell turned away, smile fixed, and said, "Fine, let's see if she can hold the room." When the crowd thinned toward the wine table, the noise softened to a low hum. Ina sat behind her makeshift display, sketching quietly, faces of strangers who kept pretending not to stare. Every few minutes, someone would drift by, leave a bill or a compliment, then move on, unsure if they were witnessing art or guilt. Ethan hovered nearby, trying to look casual, his hands buried in his pockets. The tension of what he'd just done was settling in, a visible crack between his father's approval and his own conscience. Finally, Anna spoke without looking up. "You shouldn't have done that," Ethan blinked. "What stood up for you?" She met his eyes. "You made it a spectacle. They're not buying my art now. They're buying your surname." Her words were calm, but they landed hard. Around them, laughter and music swelled again, safe behind privilege. "I didn't mean to make you a symbol," he said quietly. I just didn't want them to shove you off the sidewalk like trash. She wiped her fingers on a tissue, leaving black streaks. Then let me decide where I stand. That's the only thing I own. Ethan hesitated. What do you want me to do? Nothing, she said, closing her sketchbook. You've already done enough. He looked around, the guests, the shimmering art walls, his father pretending to be engaged in another conversation. You shouldn't have to fight this hard just to be seen. Anna's expression softened slightly. Everyone fights for something. You just fight from different floors. That line stayed in the air between them, sharp and honest. After a long silence, Ethan said, If you'll let me, I can help. Quietly. Not for attention. She studied him for a moment, measuring the weight of his words. Help how? There's a community arts grant. Applications close this week. My foundation sponsors it, but you'd control the submission. No charity, no pity. Just paperwork and proof. Anna hesitated. And if I say yes? Then we do it your way, he said. She nodded slowly, more to herself than to him. Fine, but only if my name comes before yours. Ethan smiled faintly. Deal. And somewhere across the glittering room, Maxwell Vale's expression tightened. He had just realized his son's rebellion wasn't a moment, it was a beginning. By Monday morning, the city had swallowed the scandal. The sidewalk incident was reduced to a whispered footnote among the foundation staff. But for Anna and Ethan, it had become something else, a project neither could back out of. They met in the small corner of a public library in Morningside Heights, laptops open, papers spread between them. The community arts grant required a full proposal, mission statement, impact plan, budget projections. Things Anna had never written and Ethan had never needed to explain. At first, it was awkward. She typed slowly, deliberate, afraid of sounding uneducated. He spoke in clipped, polished sentences, the kind that made her roll her eyes. But slowly, they began to learn each other's languages. When Anna described the real cost of living, the extra bus fare, the clinic parking fee, the paper receipt that meant skipped dinners, Ethan listened, really listened. For the first time, numbers had faces. When Ethan explained how foundations worked, how art could be protected legally and paid fairly, Anna realized money wasn't magic. It was paperwork and persistence. They spent hours debating tone. He wanted to say underprivileged artists. She changed it to unseen creators. He smiled and said, better. At night, they worked remotely. His comments appeared in neat blue text, hers in stubborn black ink, scanned from her handwritten notes. Sometimes he'd correct her grammar, sometimes she'd strike through his politeness. But with every exchange, the distance between Queens and Park Avenue shrank by a word or two. 3 days in, they had a title for their proposal, The Invisible Engine and the Gilded Door. It was Anna's phrase, and Ethan didn't edit a single word. For the first time, their worlds weren't colliding, they were beginning to build something together. On purpose, they met again on a grey afternoon in a small cafe near Columbia University, the grant draft open between them. Rain streaked the windows, pooling light across the screen. They were tired, sharp and honest now, past politeness. Anna leaned back, reading the section aloud. The invisible engine and the gilded door, acknowledging that the engines of privilege often run on unseen hands. She paused. That's what it is, isn't it? You don't see the engine until it stops working. Ethan nodded slowly. And you don't realize the door is gilded until you try to open it. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the espresso machine filled the silence. It wasn't a metaphor anymore. It was confession. Ethan's voice softened. When my mom was sick, the only person who told me the truth wasn't a doctor or a board member. It was her nurse. She sat me down and said, money buys time, not courage. I've never forgotten that. Anna looked at him differently now. The bitterness she'd carried toward his last name eased, just a little. My mom says the same thing in her way, she murmured. She says we don't bow, we don't break. That's how she faces bills, people, everything. He smiled faintly. Then maybe that's what this project is really about, showing that the engine and the door need each other to move anything at all. Anna nodded, closing the laptop. Then we tell that truth on our terms. The rain eased outside. For the first time, they weren't from different worlds. They were simply two people, both raised by women who taught them that survival and dignity are not opposites, and that shared truth would carry them straight into the spotlight neither of them had planned to face. The Vale Foundation board hall was colder than it looked. Glass, steel, and quiet money. Rows of donors and trustees filled the seats, waiting for the final round of grant pitches. Maxwell Vale sat near the aisle, immaculate as ever, hands folded. Across the room, Anna spotted her mother, Maria, wrapped in her best thrifted blazer, smiling despite the fatigue. When their names were called, Anna Morales and Ethan Vale, the murmurs started immediately. Some whispered curiosity, others judgment. Ethan gave her a small nod. "You ready?" Anna exhaled. "Always." She stepped forward, not as a maid's daughter, not as someone rescued, but as the voice of her own work. Her tone was steady, her English precise. "This proposal is called The Invisible Engine and the Gilded Door. It's about the people who keep art, comfort and privilege running without ever being seen in the spotlight. It's about the doors that open for some and close for others, and how both sides can choose to change that." Whispers died. Eyes fixed on her, she lifted the old $4.99 sketchbook, its cover now wrapped in plastic to protect the torn edges. "This was all I had. Every sketch inside it paid for one day of my mother's care. Each page is worth $6.25, the price of 2 bus rides that took her to work. That's what survival costs where I come from," a donor interrupted. "You sound angry, young lady. Do you want to shame the people who can help you?" Anna met his gaze. "No," she said quietly. "I want you to see that help means nothing without respect." The room fell still. Ethan didn't add a word. He didn't need to. The panel chair cleared her throat, voice cracking. "The board votes yes." Applause began softly, spreading until even Maxwell Vale stood, slowly, grudgingly, but standing nonetheless. For the first time, the room looked exactly as it should, open. A month later, the same folding card table stood once more in the heart of the city, but this time it wasn't on a freezing sidewalk. It was set up in the lobby of the Midtown Community Clinic, beneath soft light and a sign that read, "The Open Door Fund, supporting artists and families in care." Anna's old $4.99 sketchbook rested in a glass frame beside it, open to one of her earliest charcoal portraits. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Fair price, $6.25, because dignity should never be discounted." Maria sat nearby, her treatment halfway complete, her smile stronger than Anna had ever seen. Ethan arrived quietly, no photographers, no foundation entourage, just a plain envelope with receipts for the grant's first payment and a folded note that simply said, "It's your project now." Anna looked at him once, nodded and went back to arranging the sketches. Outside, people still hurried past the glass, but inside, for the first time, the table wasn't a symbol of struggle. It was a place of exchange, of fairness, of hope made visible. The story that began with humiliation had ended in ownership, and this time, when Anna whispered, "We don't bow, we don't break," it wasn't defiance, it was peace. If you're still here, maybe something in Anna's story touched a part of you that remembers what dignity feels like when the world tries to price it. Maybe you've stood outside a door that wouldn't open, wondering what made you less deserving of warmth or respect. Anna's story isn't about charity. It's about equality, about a girl who refused to beg, a man who learned to listen, and a world that bent just slightly toward fairness. So if this story made you feel something, share it. Not for views, but for voices like hers, quiet, persistent and real, because sometimes all it takes to change everything is one person who says, "Let her in," and if you ever forget your worth, remember Anna's promise, "We don't bow, we don't break." Thank you for listening. Stay kind, stay open, and keep your doors unlocked.